Let's talk about The Way of Kings Prime by Brandon Sanderson. I've got kind of a format here, but I am going to butcher it and mix it and whatever. I'm going to try and keep up with it, but this is my first time with this, and I'm going to do the best I can for you. But starting off with The Way of Kings Prime, which is a book that is not within the series of The Way of Kings, the Lightbringer series. It is outside of that, and it is essentially a alternate universe version of the story. And I personally recommend that you do not read this unless you have read the first 3 books of the Lightbringer series, because it can spoil some things, even though they're not the same stories. It can spoil the way some of the stuff works and some of the characters' arcs. But I guess alternatively, you could say reading those 3 books kind of spoils this one in some ways, but I don't really see it that way. But let's get into my rating. My rating for The Way of Kings Prime is, surprisingly, 4 stars. The reason for the 4 stars and not 5, because usually Brandon Sanderson gets 5 stars from me just about any book I've ever read. This may be the only 4-star review I've ever given a Sanderson book. I'm not sure. I'd have to check. But the reason it's down is because I'm comparing it to other Sanderson books. If I was comparing it to, if I had read something else, whatever, and came to this, and if this was the first Sanderson book I read, I probably would rate it a 5. But comparing it to others of itself, The Way of Kings itself, The Way of Kings series, the way Brandon just writes general, this is a 4 compared to those. So again, a 5 compared to just about everything else, but I'm going to rate it a 4 because I just feel like it needs to get that little notch down because it's just not as good as the other Sanderson stuff. But I do recommend every person that is a fan of Sanderson and The Way of Kings and the Lightbringer series and any of that, I think you need to come back and read this at some point because, and if you're just an enjoyer of an author, and maybe the growth of coming from one thing to another, because you kind of see the gradual difference of the way Sanderson wrote at one time to what he writes now. Or it's possible that what you're seeing is, the 3rd or 4th draft before it's fully finalized and edited, you could also say. Especially because there were definitely some grammar errors and spelling errors and very simple things that I would think usually would be caught by an editor in this, because it definitely felt more like reading somebody's first or second work that they published themselves. Probably something like I wrote that's on, anyway, not going to go into that. But all right, so next section that I'm going to hit in here is what is called warnings. And this is, for the future, this would be an area where you need to make sure, or I would tell you some things in the book that, hey, you might want to be aware that this is in the book. Well, Sanderson usually does a really good job of keeping his books what I would consider clean, and you don't really have to worry about language or things of the sexual nature or stuff like that in his books. And that stands for this one as well. But I think the only warning that I have coming into this is what I've already said before. Make sure you're about 3 books into the series before coming to this, because otherwise you're going to kind of spoil yourself. Anyway, that's probably all I got on warnings here. And as far as this next section, I'm just going to combine these 2 for this book because I'm kind of hitting everything all at once. Because Way of Kings Prime, I almost can't talk about it without comparing it to the original series, because I've already done it as I've been talking about the rating here without even getting into compare. So what did I learn? I feel like I learned, like I said, the author process and whatever. And as we move forward, I want to go ahead and let you know we're probably going to get into some spoilers here. So be aware, spoiler alert from this point forward. I think one of the biggest things I learned as I read this was definitely author difference, author change, author growth. But I think the premise or the underlining theme of this story was believing in yourself, believing in others, and encouraging you to move forward, which ultimately is probably the biggest thing that is the theme throughout the Way of Kings series itself. If you just look at the things, the oaths and everything that they have and how they fit together, Kaladin's story. So as we move into compare here, we're definitely going to get into some spoiler stuff because there's a lot of stuff that's different from the original series itself and this Prime series. One of the ways I looked at it as going into this, or as I've read it, I almost felt like reading this book was like watching a Hollywood movie based on the original series. That's what it felt like. It felt like somebody took the series, the official series, and said, "I want to make a movie out of this," and then they made what this book is. Because then you're like the characters' names are different, the way the magic works is different, the way the shards works, like everything's so different. But there's like just enough that's the same. You're like, this is clearly this story. Jasna's in it, or Yasna is in it. Dalinar is in it, and they all have the same names. You don't get a whole lot of Dalinar in this, not as compared to what you're getting in the official series. You don't get a whole lot of character growth. He does have some of the tendencies that he has in the other books. I don't think there's not a whole lot of things being brought up about him being the Blackthorn and his past and how he was more savage than after his brother dies. And you don't get a whole lot of information about his brother dying either. It's just kind of, that's already happened. The war with, there's not a war with the Pershindi in the Shattered Plains. There's a war with another faction of people. And there's a person they called the Betrayer, the Traitor. Y'all, I actually finished this book in December. I just haven't been able to sit down and record. But anyway, so there's just vast differences when it comes to a lot of that. And you can tell that there was a lot more thought put into everything in this book. There's nowhere near as much character growth. And so as far as a big thing that's in this book that I really enjoyed that is not in the official series is the character of Talon. I think he's in, and just forgive me, but I know that there is a herald that's brought up near the end of Words of Radiance. I can't remember his name right now. It's probably the same one that would make sense. But in that, he's like crazy. He's like mad dog, feral almost crazy. And so, but in the Way of Kings Prime, Talon returns. He is a herald. He's the only one that returns. And he's an interesting character, I have to say. His character movement and growth and everything in this book was phenomenal. He was a very good character, and everything he went through, I felt, and he was definitely interesting the whole time. Jasna is interesting. You get a lot of her. There's a lot of things in Prime that feels like it's stuff that could have happened in the past for the official series. As far as like Jasna leaving, her not believing in God and everything, that's like she has that thought process, and you get a tad of it, but she hasn't ran off. She hasn't gone to go research anything or whatever. It's more like she's still in the throes of trying to decide in this book, rather than in the official set. She's already gone. She's already made those decisions, and people just know that that's her thought process. She's essentially a heretic in the other books, but in this, there's a sect of people who are able to do the magic that she can do, and they know about them, and they change, like kind of what she does. But obviously, in the Way of Kings, it's more of a that doesn't exist. They don't even know like they knew that it's more of a legend. The people who could have done that kind of stuff, the Radiants, and then so there's a lot of stuff that's like taken and stretched out to much more depth and I don't know, the official series does a much better job of portraying all of that. But there's also just stuff that's just plain old different. I just I couldn't even touch and hit everything that was different. What do I like better? Which one do I like better? I like the official series better for sure because there's more to it. But I would also read this. Like if this continued on, I'd read it and I think I'd enjoy it just as well as I did enjoy this, or as much as I might enjoy another series that of books that's coming, that comes out or whatever. So uh, it's quite good. You don't have Shanna. I don't know how to Shalyn. Shalyn. There is a character that is similar to her. She has many of the same things that she does in the original series, but very vast difference in who she is, why she's there, and all of that. I love the slow progression of her character throughout the other series as she's drawing, and you begin to learn more and more about her abilities and everything. This book there wasn't much there. There just wasn't much there. She doesn't even know how. Anyway, I don't want to get into a lot of that. Kaladin is a big one that I want to make sure I mention. Kaladin is not really in this book. There is a character of Kaladin in this with the name of Kaladin, but he's not Kaladin. There's another guy. His name starts with an M. I can't even remember what it is right now. That's the Kaladin character, and he is a regular fighter. He's within the battle with them. He saves the king. He is given shard plate and a shard blade from the person who attacked the king and everything. And he takes it, and he learns how to fight, and he meets Dalinor's children, and they help him, but you don't have the drama and the stuff that really just brings his character up. You don't have the sprint and the details that go in between them. All of that is not there, and while it's still interesting, his character is very flat in this book. He barely moves from one thing to another. By the end, you're kind of like, okay, I got you. Dalinar, like I said, you don't get a whole lot of him either. Adolin is not in it. I guess his compartment character in it, he goes off to fight because he doesn't agree with the king, so he's like going against him. And I'm not, even though this is a spoiler alert area, I'm going to have a hard time actually dropping heavy spoilers anytime I do reviews. But because I know, like right now, I've got stuff in my head, and I'm like, I don't really want to say that. But because I really want, if you haven't read this and you continue to go on, I want you to be able to go ahead and read and enjoy that. So that's how much I did ultimately enjoy this book, is that I think you should check it out, and definitely if you're a fan of Sanderson and The Way of Kings. So see you next time.